I found yet another piece of evidence that everyone has missed that proves this was not an accident. I'll have to admit, I am impressed at the speed with which the U.S. government has rolled out this army, this legion of trained psychological operational warfighters to get out in front of the media and start telling plausible lies. Remember a couple videos ago we talked about how Americans are addicted to plausible deniability? Well, that's what's going on. Anything anybody can grasp onto to make believe in their minds that their eyes aren't telling them the truth, they're going to grab onto that. Now, what is that piece of evidence? What is that piece of information? It goes back to what we were talking about with Newton's first law. An object in motion will stay in motion in that same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Now, what if I told you there is proof for this, that it wasn't a loss of power that caused them to turn into the piling, it was an increase in power, because that would go along with Newton's first law of motion. Now, real quick, as always, I want to say thank you to everyone who continues to join us at the Florida Maquis Patreon channel. Only $1 per month. Over there, we take the gloves off. We don't hem-haw around. We get right to the meat and potatoes of what needs to be said, and sometimes that bothers a few folks. I've had folks go over there, and they've signed up and said, whoa, Maquis, wait a minute, some of the imagery here, it's a little too adult for me. I just don't think I can handle it. Can I have my dollar back? Absolutely. Not a problem. First 3 months. Fully refundable, $1 per month. There's a $5 level over there. Those are another level of intense. You just kind of have to have a strong stomach. You got to basically be from either Gen X or older generation to be able to handle this kind of imagery, because that's what we were used to. Now, I'm not going to waste a lot of your time tonight. Let's get right to it. What is that piece of evidence? Well, we're here at Vessel Finder. This is on YouTube, and they track all of these ships, and this is going to be kind of hard to see, but once you see it, you'll never unsee it. Now, this is the port of Baltimore. This down here, of course, is the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Up here, you can see a yellow dot and two blue dots. The yellow dot is, of course, the MV Dolly, the big cargo ship. The two blue dots are the tugs that are assisting it out of port. Now, this is the key. There's been a lot of argument there. Oh, if the tugboats would have only been there to take it all the way out past the bridge, this would have never happened. They did help it make a turn, but that's the key. Let's play this forward. So as you can see, here they start to move, and they're making their turn. Everything's fine. No problem. They get the ship turned all the way to between 140 and 141 degrees. To give you an example, 180 is direct south, 90 is direct east, so somewhere just about halfway in between there, basically in a southeasterly direction. Now, as you can see, the tugboats disappear. The Dolly is at 140 degrees, 6.2 knots, and gaining speed. We're going to play this forward a little farther. 6.2, 7.5, 7.6. Over 8 knots. So for this entire time, it doesn't change course at all. 140 degrees and gains 2 knots in speed. What does that mean? There's no electrical problems. There's no engine problems. They got pedal to the metal. They're they're heading directly where they need to go. Now, how do we know this? Florida Maquis, wouldn't they have had to turn to miss? Maybe they're aimed at something. Let's go look. Let's go look. This is the great thing about Google Earth Pro. This is where they were, right here, when those tugs let go. I have this line drawn, 140.38 degrees, all the way through the bridge. Now, if you look closely, and you can do this for yourself with the Google Earth Pro, here's one piling right here. Here's the other one. 140.38 degrees this line is set at. They could have gone as far north as 139. They could have gone all the way down to 142. They had 3 degrees of play, and they wouldn't have hit anything. Even at this point, at 8 knots, they were already almost to here, and everything was fine. They could have cut power, and that ship would have just sailed in a straight line directly underneath that bridge. Why do we know this? Because of Newton's first law. Unless acted upon by, pay attention here, an unbalanced force. There are people out there saying, well, there was a 10-knot breeze across the port bow. 10-knot breeze? That's not an unbalanced force, my friend. Not nearly enough to move a ship in that short distance, in that amount of time. No chance. From here to here is 5 kilometers. What we showed, they're still at this point accelerating 140 degrees, 8 knots. Let's keep going forward. 141. All of a sudden, they're still accelerating 8.3, 8.8 knots, 8.5 knots. They're still on course. 8.2, 8.7 knots, 8.7 knots. No loss of power. See how they're still, at this point, you would have alleged by now, for sure, they would have lost power. But they're still at 8, they're still accelerating. Holding 141 degrees at this point. 8.6 knots, 8.5 knots, 8.2 knots. They're still at 8 knots here when they make the turn. They're still at 8 knots here while they make the turn. Now all of a sudden, their attitude is 150 degrees, 152 degrees, 155 degrees. And they've slowed, but only to 6.5 knots. Let's play it the rest of the way through. 158 degrees, still at 6.8 knots. And that's when they hit, and then everybody shows up to the bridge. Now, why is any of that important? Why didn't anybody try to reverse out of this? You see, here's my question. If the tugs could have helped this giant cargo ship stay on course, then why in the world? There was no evidence that there was any loss of engine power at this point. No evidence whatsoever. We've watched, let's bring that up real quick. Let's look at it with our own eyes. We have it on loop. See that generator burning? We'll watch this loop through one more time. Now, look at this in the context of everything we just showed. This ship's under power. It's at this point, it's accelerating. Lights blinking or not, it's accelerating and turning. Here's where the turn occurs. And there's the giant diesel smoke of them hitting the guns and slamming right into it. A lot of folks have talked about the anchor being dropped. They dropped anchor. They were dragging an anchor. BP Earthwatch was reporting earlier today that there's a huge high-pressure gas line under there. How do we know that wasn't the target? How do we know that wasn't the target? Maybe this was Russia's response to the pipeline bombing over in the what was the pipeline that got sabotaged a year or two ago. Maybe they were going after one of America's pipelines here. Was it in the Baltic Sea? Where was it at? Where there was a huge pipeline, Russian pipeline, that even our government said we're not going to let it go through, and all of a sudden it was sabotaged and blew up. How do we know this wasn't an attempt at that? Maybe the bridge was just a side casualty, that they were going after that gas line under there. Yeah, here it is. This is the gas pipeline that's on top. A couple of different channels have reported this. But the Telegraph, Tom Sharp, talks about this, about how it couldn't possibly have been terrorism. It's not terrorism. There's no way it's terrorism. Nobody even investigated it. Does nobody even think about this, that they didn't even bother to try to look into the idea that within a matter of less than 24 hours they had ruled it out? They didn't even do that with the Fitz and the McCain. And here's another: tugboats left before ship reached Baltimore Bridge. They might have saved it. Apparently not. Apparently not. And I love this picture. This is from way high above. You can actually see, here's where the ship is. You can see where it was docked. You can see the tiny amount of space here. Way up here in the upper right is where it was docked. This is where it made its turn. And from here, it went from 0 knots to 8 knots, fully floored, and only slowed because it was making a hard turn into the piling under power. It's just amazing to see that. I mean, this is pretty much a slam dunk that this was purposeful. Somebody did this. It was intentional. The ship hadn't lost power. I don't care if they're blinking the lights on or off or not. Ship hadn't lost power. It was under power. That's the only way it would have had the ability to make that hard of a turn at the last minute like that. If they lost power and they didn't want to hit the bridge, all they had to do was stay on the exact same course. The exact same course that the tugboats left them on. Let's back it up. We'll play it again. All right, there they go. They've got it 140 degrees at 6 knots. They could have cut power right there, and that line would have taken them right under the bridge, no problems. I'll leave it there. I won't waste your whole night saying the same thing over and over again. But the idea that so few people, so few want to consider this and want to pursue it and want to look into this is, it's breathtaking. So once again, God bless all of you over there at Patreon. God bless all of you here too. I do appreciate you guys. Don't get me wrong, but things have changed precipitously in social media over the last 6 to 8 years. And this is now the only way to survive. And that's really all it is. It's only survival at this point. So God bless all of you. I'll pray for you. Pray for me. Pray for each other. Have a happy Easter. Lift each other up. He is risen. Like, share, subscribe. And we'll see you guys next time.